All right, everybody. It is 3:20, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. There will be a few more people that come in, I expect, but we'll go ahead and get started right now. Welcome to another exciting session at the Sakai Virtual Conference. The title of this session is Service Learning in a Corporate Communication Capstone. Our presenter is Lee Horaceberger from Walsh University. Lee is a professional associate professor in the Division of Literature, Language, and Communication in the School of Arts and Sciences at Walsh University, and she holds degrees from the Ohio State University and the University of Akron. She teaches both traditional and adult learners in the corporate communication major there. My name is Matt Burgess. I'm from the University of Virginia, and I'll be facilitating that session. Just a few reminders before we get started. First of all, please note that all attendees are muted when they enter the meeting room, so if you'd like to speak or ask a question later in the session, you'll need to unmute yourself. Also, if you have any questions, you can enter them in the chat box in the window at any time. I'll be monitoring the chat box along with Lee as she's able, and Lee will try to address questions during the presentation if possible or at the end of the session. And just a final reminder, this session is being automatically recorded. I know there are some folks who wanted to join us but couldn't join this session, so it's being automatically recorded so that it will be available to everybody, and it will be available at a later date on the Sakai YouTube channel. So I think that's all I have to say. Take it away, Lee, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Matt, for those introductions, and good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank the Sakai Virtual Conference for accepting my proposal and allowing me to present my Service Learning Corporate Communication Capstone. We did a collaboration with the Oriole Historical Society, and that's primarily what this presentation will be about. As Matt said, I teach in the corporate communication major, and we do have some service learning embedded in these classes. From what I've heard all afternoon from some of my sessions, my presentation is going to be a little bit different. It's more of the user perspective as opposed to the technical and development folks who have been presenting. So I hope that gives you a different perspective. What I'd like to talk about, my presentation will be in three parts. First, I want to talk about the class, the student, and who our collaborative partner was. And then I want to talk about the Sakai tools that we use to meet our course goals, and then explain some of the advantages and disadvantages that I've uncovered, and maybe some ideas that I can help improve my courses in the future, maybe get some feedback from all of you too. The course is the Capstone, which is our pinnacle course in our communication major. And what this class allows the students to do is integrate skills and knowledge garnered downstream in other classes. And what we do is we pick out a communication partner and we focus on the strategies, practices, communication, and media management of this organization. The class is taught in face-to-face setting, and we use Sakai pretty much as our classroom management tool. So everything that's happening in the class is put up on Sakai. The class and the students are composed of either our traditional students on our main campus. So we usually have about 16 students over 15 weeks. And then we also use this course in our School for Professional Studies. And this accommodates our non-traditional students. We usually have about 10 students in a session, and this is in an accelerated format on various satellite campuses away from the main campus. And what we find with the students in the SPS, they're typically older students. They're a lot more mature. They work full time, but what also we uncovered is that they don't necessarily work in the field of communications. This is new for them as well. And this particular corporate communication class was taught at our SPS campus at Wayne College campus, which is about 30 miles from our main campus. In an accelerated format, we met once a week for 4 hours over a 7-week period with 7 students. What's good about this class is it's pretty beneficial to not only our traditional learners, but our adult learners returning to the campus, especially when they begin to look for a job search. If they can talk about real hands-on experience, that makes them heads and shoulders a lot more valuable to the employer than maybe just a student who hasn't taken a service learning course. And also the students are able to build good artifacts to go into their portfolio. Now, our service learning partner for this particular class was the Orville Historical Society, the 501(c) nonprofit, and it's located in Orville, Ohio. Its major function is to preserve the history of the city. What Orville Historical Society has, it has a museum, and it also had a Smith War homestead. And the organization was run primarily by volunteers. A lot of these folks work full-time outside of the museum. And even though they have some pretty active volunteers, not one of them could really be full-time for the homestead or the museum, so they didn't really have any current operating hours. And even though this board has thought about different ways to raise awareness and increase engagement in the community, and they've thought about different ways to rent their facility, they hadn't taken an active approach. And how we were introduced to them was the Chamber of Commerce in Orville. We reached out to them, and one of my former students just happened to be employed there, and she recommended several different agencies. One of them was the Orville Historical Society, which seems like a pretty natural fit for my class and for this course. And the problem or project of this service learning partnership was to look at and make a complete assessment of Orville Historical Society's current marketing efforts. We wanted to raise awareness of this organization, both for the homestead and the museum. And we wanted to make some recommendations on how they could grow their membership and their volunteer base by using not only their current marketing efforts, but try to help them in new ways. And so for my students, this meant looking at current marketing efforts of the Orville Historical Society and its volunteer base and try to figure out ways to increase that. And we were also going to look at ways to help them with the rental of both their homestead and the museum and increase their marketing efforts through traditional print, but also through some new media. So we wanted to introduce them to Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, and help them develop a web presence. And what the students are going to have to do to get to that point is they've got to use some research and make some comparisons and recommendations for our partner. My teaching philosophy is that students learn best with some hands-on learning and real-life applications. Although students learn pretty well by looking at a textbook case, when we pull in a service learning partner and try to develop a collaboration, students understand really quickly that partners and problems don't often follow that script that they see in a textbook. And what happens is that student and the students begin to have to think more creatively about the partner's campaign and really think about some good solutions. So also in this class, what I see is a lot of non-quantitative learning taking place where students get that confidence and they learn to develop leadership skills. That's all taking place as well as working on assignments. And what's good about service learning for us is our college is based on the students being servant leaders. That's all part of our mission. And one of the good things about Sakai is that because this class was taught at the SPS, which are School for Professional Studies, it's pretty fast paced. And the students were going to meet the first class with the partner and the last class with the partner to make a presentation and offer recommendations. And why we were able to use Sakai, it's able for me to upload a lot of information at the very beginning and help streamline the process. So before I ever even encountered those students, they were able to get to know what the class was going to be about by looking at resources, checking out the announcements. And what I want to do here is expand a little bit on some of those tools specifically for the project and how they aided us, talk about how they gave us some real good advantages, and then talk about some of the weaknesses that I've encountered and maybe some of the lessons I've learned that might help me a little bit better, or you might be able to provide some insight, or maybe they might also help you. The very first tool, which after hearing all my sessions today is probably pretty elementary to a lot of you folks, but for us it's pretty good. And that first tool is the syllabus tool. So prior to ever meeting those students, they have access to Sakai, and they can pull off the syllabus, and they can understand class expectations and understand how they're going to be graded and what the expectations for the course is going to be. And while they're looking at the syllabus, they can also go underneath the resources. Now, in addition to the syllabus tool, a really good tool that I find is the Sakai announcements. It seems pretty basic, but it's actually a very good tool for me to use. And the reason why was before the course ever began, I was able to meet with our partner and discuss some of the parameters of the project and the expected goals. Then I was able to speak to the class over Sakai before I ever met them in person and share who our partner would be, what the expectations would be for the project, what the project was going to entail. In addition, by using the announcements, I'm able to communicate with the students, let them know my expectations, let them share the class of reading, let them know some of the expectations coming from the service learning partner. And the best advantage about announcements is when I'm speaking with my class about the project and the challenges, everyone that's embedded with the class, the service learning partner, the librarian, our campus service learning director, they were all embedded with our class. They see the announcements at the same time. And what the announcements does is it guarantees the same message across several distinct audiences all at the same time. And I think if you can look at this pretty closely on the left-hand side, it just shows a list of the announcements I'm giving. And where the arrow's coming off, it shows some of the links from our partner that we can explore those before we ever meet in person. Additionally, what announcements and some of the tools do in Sakai, the announcements, email, voicemail, discussion forums, all the face-to-face, the class meetings, and the lectures, those are all used to facilitate active communication among all our partners. The idea is we're trying to build a collaborative community all within Sakai and also between the classroom and the service learning partners location as well. And I hope that becomes more evident as I march on through the presentation. Now, one advantage of having that service learning partner embedded is the partner can speak directly with the students himself or herself in any way they choose. Now, when we partnered with the Oroville Historical Society, that partner was a little bit hesitant about getting on Sakai, and they really opted for more traditional communication channels, such as talking on the telephone, talking by email. But we've had service learning partners in the past who haven't been real shy. And you can see this, I put this example up. This is from one of our other service learning classes where the partner jumped in and answered questions that the students have. This slide shows that dialogue between our partner and the students. And I think probably one of the things I'm really learning as I do more of these is that for future classes that I could help maybe educate my service learning partner a little more thoroughly on how to use those announcements so that the partner could speak directly to the students in the class. And what that also does is helps us build a permanent record. Another good Sakai tool that I use often is the resources. And I know Matt, I set in on his session earlier, and he talked about having his resources up, and you put a whole bunch of things up because you want the students to really look at them, and it's like, well, what should I be looking at? So that's kind of a thing too, is how you have to guide them through the resources. But before the course began, we had a librarian embedded with our course, and she helped flesh out some other historical organizations similar to our service learning partner. These other historical organizations were linked on a library course guide that was stored on resources and that the students could look at before they ever started the class. What this background information does is helps the students frame their own research. What they start doing is looking at other historical organizations and thinking about what are they doing in regards to volunteering? What are they doing in regards to rental? How do they set up their museums displays? And so my students were able to look at the research that the librarian had put up for us right away and start to think about it. And then this guide would also help later in the course, where another assignment was the students had to go and interview outside nonprofit organization leaders and managers and try to understand the challenges that those nonprofits face. What this slide shows is it shows a number of different resources that the students could link onto. My second slide here will show that when you click on those resources from the librarian, this will be what opens up. And these slides show some of the links the librarian made available to the students through the course guide so they could frame their research about other historical societies and make judgments on the effectiveness of the outside organization's social media, venues for volunteer efforts. This slide shows the social media of the Virginia Historical Society. For example, what type of posts were they making and how often, what were the reactions from the posts. And so what that does is that gives the student an idea of like, you know what, if they're putting up a lot of images and they're getting a lot of reactions, that's probably a pretty good recommendation that I can make to our partner. And the second example shows the Cleveland Historical Society. It's on the right-hand side, and it shows their Instagram page. So when the student can look at that, they can really think about how to make suggestions, because the Orville Historical Society, they had a plethora of artifacts in this museum that no one knew about. We walked through this fantastic museum, and even the people in the town weren't even sure what all was inside there. And another treasure that the Historical Society had was they had these great photographic images from the city, and they were virtually unknown outside of this Historical Society. And so these two examples that the librarian helped us uncover gave my students better ways to help showcase the Orville Historical Society. What these examples do is help the student think about new ways to present our partner to a new audience, and even how to use that social media. So they're learning how to use it, how different ways happen, different reactions on the social media. Matt, how am I doing? Do we have any questions? Am I buzzing along okay?
No questions yet, Lee. I've got a couple of questions, but I can save them till the end. I think things are going great. Just keep going right along.
Okay. All right. Just break in whenever you have to.
I will do.
Thanks, Matt. What part of our project was the research, and what this involved was using several tools. Each student was required to find an article that outlined a problem pretty similar to the Orville Historical Society. The articles could address volunteering, rental venues, or even historical societies in general. And during the class session, the students met with the librarian, because we are off campus. We're at one of the satellite campuses. The librarian met with us via Blue Jeans to discuss their article research. And then she remained embedded with the class on Sakai, and she could offer additional assistance to students as they were researching articles or researching local nonprofits, marketing materials, or even interviewing outside nonprofit agencies. And some of our final evaluations show us that students appreciated that librarian being embedded within the course, and were in favor of the discussions online and in class, and even to help them with their independent research as they were learning. What our next slide shows us is this is where the student actually goes to the Gradebook, and they've uploaded their article that they've researched, they've uploaded their summary, and then what this is my comments to the student on how to improve that article that they've summarized, how to improve what they've summarized, how to make it apply to our partner. And then what happens is the students put all those into a compilation, and I hope I can go in this and not get lost here. We go out to the component, which is, this is where they compiled all of their research. And you can see this is all of the students, their summary to the partner. And then what they've also done is given the partner an original copy of that article from the librarian. So that could be where the partner goes and looks up some of the research. Now, continuing back a little bit, looking at that again, all the assignments for the Service Learning Project are available through assignments, so the students are easily able to grab those off of there and know what the deadlines are. They see evaluations coming back from the instructor, and they know how to modify their project, and we are continually tweaking as we go. And then once everything is graded and the student makes the improvement, then we're building that repository, which I'll show you at the very end. This particular slide is part of the resources too. And one of the pieces that we did was we were able to upload former projects or projects that were completed in the past. This allowed the students to look at them as templates, discuss strengths and weaknesses of the project. This helped them understand the professionalism that would be required to complete the Capstone Service Learning Project. And of this particular file, this was probably looked at about 43 times, giving them guidance. And as the students work on their project, that'll become part of the repository too. And I just want to show you a little bit. So as the students are in resources, they can go to these former projects. This is one we completed before. They can see the template. They can see all of the different categories. They've got the research articles here, just saw in the previous slide. This particular class ran a survey. They can take a look at that. They did some interviewing, and then they ran a SWOT analysis, and then they also made recommendations for their particular partner. And what the class can do is kind of scroll down and just take a look at, like, oh, this is what that class did. I have kind of a good idea of what I should also be thinking. And we've put up several projects that they can take a look at in the resources. A tool that works pretty good for me in Sakai is the Sakai Gradebook. This slide shows like a student's reflection and then my feedback encouraging the student to get out of her comfort zone and try to apply some of her creative abilities to help our service learning partner. In one of the, in her reflection, she shares that she feels introverted but artistic. And I try to encourage her to, along with her fellow peers, to step out of her comfort zone and use some of her art ability and design ability. And drawing on her strengths and applauded by her classmates, the student was able to create a template note card and also redesign the logo of the partner. By using the Sakai Gradebook with the return feedback and the discussion tool, the service learning projects build community among students. A lot of the students don't really know each other well at the beginning of the course, but by the project's completion, they feel like they're a pretty cohesive and a pretty effective team. And as the project accelerates toward completion, students lean a lot heavier on their peers and feedback both through the discussion for the completion of their part of the project. And so sharing that information, assisting and offering guidance is pretty helpful as the project unfolds. And this is just a quick slide to show you what that student completed. She has her note card on the left, which could be used for thank you cards, fundraising cards, or just note cards from that or the Historical Society. And the second was her makeover of the logo. A big part of service learning is that self-reflection, because although students learn by doing, they learn better by thinking and really reflecting about what they're learning about. And this project offers multiple reflection channels. Reflections were submitted to Sakai assignments in written format, and feedback was returned via the Sakai Gradebook. Student reflections also involve two-man teams, and this helps meet some of our course goals, which is to help them with the oral presentation. So the students take reflections, they use their recording device, their iPads, their phones, and they upload it to YouTube and then share that link within the final summary to the community partner. And then what we also do at the end of the class, a final reflection with the instructor, students, and the service learning director and our service learning partners held to reflect on the strengths and weaknesses of our project. And what this slide shows is this is one of our students. I just do a real quick play, and you can just see this is just something they talk about their own strengths and weaknesses.
Lee, we can't really hear that audio on the recording, so we might just want to go ahead. No, that's quite all right.
Sorry about that. I didn't realize that. I could hear him talking. I should have did something better on that. Oh, probably because I had it. Okay. All right. This next slide shows a little bit of our discussion forum, and that can be pretty useful to move the messages from peer to peer or between the professor and the student. And what the forums enable the students to do is provide feedback or recommendations about a course of action a student might undertake with a service learning partner. The students could examine the process of the project and then adjust that progress as it unfolded. A lot of these interactions help to build community and camaraderie in a short time. A student here made a website. She's getting a little bit of feedback from her classmates. And one of the disadvantages I found about the forum is that sometimes those students, even though we have the forum there to build that record about the class and also to share interactions, they still want to communicate via text, via messages, or on their own email, on their own accounts. And what that does is that cuts a lot of the rest of us all out of that interaction, what's taking place, how's the thought process working. And I think on my part, I need to just model some better answers and also some prompts for the students, as well as making those discussions a more valuable part of the overall grade. And one of the other tools that Sakai uses is statistics. What this helps me do as the instructor is to see what files the students are looking at and with what frequency. The information is pretty valuable when planning future courses. You can see what's working, what's not. And you can see what the students open and what tools they use the most. And like I said earlier this morning, one of the sessions talked about the resources. And those stats could really help categorize and maybe help prioritize what files are most important as well. So some of the strengths that we've uncovered from the class is it's not only beneficial to our adult learners returning to campus, but particularly really beneficial for our traditional students when they begin a job search. A lot of employers insist on practical experience. This course offers real-life application of communication and technology skills that students easily can translate into the working world. And I also said that a real good advantage to Sakai is the announcements, where the professor can send one consistent message to all the target publics on ECN. Resources really help to place the research material and other examples for our librarian. An example from the previous courses were also available to serve as templates and guides for the class on what the standard would be. So those were some real good strengths. And then some of the weaknesses that I found. One of the weaknesses for sure was the discussions where the contents weren't as in-depth for offering real good constructive feedback. Sometimes we had comments that ranged from, yeah, I think your project piece looks really nice, or hey, that looks great, which isn't really concrete. It doesn't give us something to really hang on to. And then also, one of the disadvantages is when we do use the discussion forum, like I said, the students still want to engage in old ways like their texting, email, and cell phone, which is probably pretty good, but it cuts the rest of the class out of that interaction. And one of the other weaknesses that we talked about really early is how I could help my partners feel more at ease with using Sakai tools to help us all build a pretty good community. And probably another disadvantage is on Sakai, and I hope this changes as I hear more new innovations coming, is that when we're building our archive of artifacts to share with our community partner, one of the big downfalls in using Sakai is we haven't found a really good way to build a repository of artifacts and then to use that as a presentation tool for our partner for future records. We have been using a closed system with our library, and what that does is that enables us to give a link to our partner then. But I'm hoping maybe Sakai will come up with a pretty good alternative. And then just to conclude here, what some of our students have said is they said the entire project, the Orville Historical Society, was a great opportunity. It was a good experience. We learned a lot. We were able to get hands-on experience in working on our marketing plan. We figured out strategies for the local organization. We enjoyed working with and learning more about the society. There were a few obstacles, but we pushed through. We came up with some good ideas. Our hope is that it will continue on their path to success and implement some of our ideas to help achieve all of their goals. And one thing that the Orville Historical Society did do is they ended up hiring a public relations person to help its efforts at the conclusion of our project. So that was a positive. And then more on the conclusion, just some things that I've learned that I need to do, which is connect the partners, the students, and the professor in the class in a better way through Sakai. But by using Sakai, our efforts were pretty successful. I know now that we're going to get new rubrics. I've heard that today in some of the sessions. So that'd be awesome. Figure out how to embed those rubrics right into the gradebook. And with more feedback, more guidance, more modeling, I think the discussion forum will be pretty successful as well. And then just one of my thoughts was also that a better way to evolve our service learning partner within Sakai. Although we're able to draw feedback both initially with the project from our partner and at the final presentation, it would be wonderful if we could somehow get our partner more involved so that we could include that in the records. If it was more possible to embed the partner and get dialogue going with them, it would probably help us bring them into the class discussion. Sometimes their own inhibitions about using technology is difficult, but I'm thinking maybe if I gave a little tutorial or a better tutorial at the beginning, they might be less hesitant to weigh in. And then this just shows an overview of our entire project for this particular class. And if we click right here, this shows our repository inside the library. And this is the link that we give our partner. And some of the recommendations the students made over the course of the 7 weeks. They came up with a rental agreement for the partner. They came up with a photo cache of lots of photographs that could be used on Instagram. They came up with a brochure. Had one student that was able to put together a website, a working website for them, which was pretty awesome. We demonstrated a sample Facebook page for them and showed them some posts that they could possibly use. And then we had an Instagram and Twitter account set up that they were pretty open to. And then came up with a volunteer application, and then also talked to them about historical markers which would mark their site, and then just how to raise their brand awareness. One student actually pulled in all of the different publications around the area that they could be mentioned. And so they did a pretty nice project for the fall. And that pretty much kind of sums it up for our collaborative service learning project and some of the different tools that I use and some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses of the whole entire project. I just open it up to any questions and answers.
Thanks so much, Lee. This has been a fabulous presentation. It's always really good to see how Sakai is being used by instructors in a practical context. We can set things up theoretically and create demo courses, but learning more about how it's actually being used in actual courses is just so beneficial. So if you have questions, feel free to turn on your mic or type those questions in the chat. I'll go ahead and throw out a question just to get started, Lee, which is, you mentioned that in the future you might like to see some kind of artifact repository in Sakai where you could store the material that your students prepared over the course of a particular project. Do you have any thoughts about what you would like that artifact repository to look like? Would you like it to look like some of those pages you created through the library? Have you thought much about that yet?
It would be really neat if we could have something that looked like a website or something like those library pages, because at the end when we make our presentation to our partner, we, instead of making a PowerPoint, like I've made a PowerPoint and then I'm also going to have my repository of artifacts, if we had something that does dual purpose, that would be great. We could pull it up for our partner, and as we present, we could show them the artifacts as well as talk about what our research involved. Does that make sense?
It does.
But, you know, Sakai doesn't allow us to do that, or they don't allow me to give a link to the partner. Like somehow the partners, I don't know if there's a wall there, but I haven't been able to make a repository on Sakai that. But it would be nice if we could do it all in one thing instead of using the library's site.
Sure. Okay. I think that's really great feedback, and that makes perfect sense to me. I think something that we also hear from instructors here at UVA is that they would like to be able to share links to content more easily with folks. I know that NYU and some other schools are planning some big upgrades to the resources tool in particular, and hopefully those will help with that, because I think I understand exactly what you're getting at there. I also had a question about the stats tool. You know, stats is not something that we have turned on at UVA at the moment, and I was wondering your just general impressions of that tool and how you felt it enhanced or didn't enhance your understanding of how the course was proceeding.
With that tool, I can kind of follow along and watch what the students are actually like looking at. I can tell what resources they're looking at. I can tell like what tools they use a lot, and so that way you can think about, okay, so they use this one a lot, so that's probably a really good thing. And then if they didn't use something else, like the discussion tool, that's one I've got to master, even though that seems pretty good. I've got to do better at driving them back into the Sakai and not letting them do texting on their phone or emailing or just talking one-on-one with the partner. That way we kind of lose that interaction. The rest of us in the class don't really know what was said or what the comments were or what the feedback was. But if we could bring it back inside, then you can kind of see what's happening with the project. Everybody can see what's happening. Because each student worked on a little bit different piece of the puzzle here. They all put it together. Like the girl worked on the website, she was getting feedback from the partner, but if we could have brought that into the discussion with the partner, we would have a record of that, and then other students would see, oh, look what they said about the part of the project. And we could see how that's unfolding, and then they're learning as they see that too, instead of like she's just sort of telling us back like, oh, I talked to them on the telephone, this is what they said. trying to understand that. Does that make sense there too?
That does make sense. Yes, thank you.
I need to
Absolutely.
I've got to figure out a better way to embed my community partner too. I've done a lot of service learning, and somehow I need to get them more into the community on Sakai, like not just announcements. Like I'm allowed to let them do announcements. I don't think I'm allowed to let them into discussions the way we're set up here. But wouldn't it be nice if they were in discussions? But then maybe you'd have to have a little private discussion in case you're discussing some shortcomings of a community partner too. You might not want them to see that, but
That's right. You might be able to create a group and use a group for that. Absolutely.
but the but the way we're kind of hooked up here is I can't really bring my partner into the discussions, which would be good to let
Sure.
them see how we're talking and then how the project unfolds. Sometimes they're disconnected, even though we're pretty staying in touch with them a lot. It would be nice if they were more involved with us the whole way through.
Sure. Well, we are right at the end of our time, unfortunately. Very quickly, Jennifer had a question about whether or not the Lessons tool has a public link that you could use for something like an artifact repository. Unfortunately, Jennifer, as far as I know, it doesn't. So at the present time, you would probably just want to try to set something up publicly in resources, which is really the only tool that supports that. So I just wanted to get that chat in our recording here. Thanks again so much to Lee for a really great and very enlightening presentation. I'm going to go ahead and end this recording for now. I agree, Jennifer. It is a bummer that that layout option isn't available through Lessons, but maybe that's something we can work on in the future. I love that idea. So thanks again, everybody, for your time in this presentation, and we'll see you in our next session.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks very much.
All right.
Thanks, Lee.
Bye.